What information or data have you guys utilized in your school? And is there any data or information that you wish you would have had access to earlier that would have been able to really contribute to your school's overall success? And what would that be if you have it? And if not, what would you love to have now if you did have access to it that you currently don't? And I'll pose that to Amanda first.
I think our teachers, when we were fully remote first quarter, really struggled with not having map data. So that's something that our district and our school has really gotten in the habit of using so that we can tailor and personalize student learning, in a normal year. So when you have students at home, we weren't able to administer that test until we got students back into school in October. So I think that teachers just felt like they were struggling with knowing where to meet kids. Where are my students? And they didn't even have OST data from the previous spring to look at. So they're trying to teach to the middle, which we've for years been telling them not to do. So I think that they just struggled with that piece. So I know that they're excited to have that data. We've actually just administered or started administering the winter map. So teachers are able to see where students are growing. And then as we head into scheduling for next school year, at least for the middle school and high school, we're having to look at new map norms that are set nationwide and really adjusting, where we push students into those advanced classes, because we're not going to see as much growth. Like, we have to be realistic. We're not going to see students where we may have seen them in the past. And we certainly don't want to limit our offerings or limit students that maybe are headed in that advanced track because of a pandemic. So we're having to consider those different things. So we're still looking at data. I think our teachers are still hungry for as much data as possible. And kind of like what Key was mentioning with the various platforms that we do have available digitally, if you want the data, it's there. We just have to figure out where it's at, how we're going to get it, and how we can best utilize it to make sure that our students are receiving the most personalized instruction available.
That's great. So that is something that I hadn't actually considered, that depending on the grade level and the testing, because they're not tested by the state every year so that you can see the growth and have that information. So just to make sure I understand, that is what you're referencing, like you guys didn't get a chance to have the state testing before this started to know where your students were before beginning instruction, and have that data so that you can best make informed choices for your instruction as a whole?
Correct. So we don't have the previous year's testing data that's mandated by the state. And then we also administer MAP in the fall when our students first walk into school. We administer it halfway through the school year and then again in the spring. And that kind of is used as they're progressing through their pacing guides and through the school year to adjust. You're going to have kids that need remediation in certain areas, but maybe need enrichment in others. You're going to have those kids that are straight middle of the road. So our teachers are constantly adapting their lessons to meet the needs of the students that are in front of them. So your first period may be different than your second period, depending on the students that are actually sitting in front of you. So that data has become very important to their lesson planning. And I think because we've been driving that home to them and really encouraging them to use it to drive their instruction, to not have it was just kind of another, like, okay, we're really, now that we've built the plane, we're flying with like no controls, like we're flying it on our own manually, and that's difficult.
Oh, yeah, I could bet. So I know Key mentioned Google Classroom, and you guys, I think all of you have mentioned Schoology. Is that, if I'm saying it correctly? So do they each offer, do they work together well, or how are you guys finding that data to help your map? Because I'm assuming you obviously still have something that you're trying to do, as you said, to not really, you don't want to teach just from the middle. You want to be able to have the information. You mentioned the information is there. It's just finding it or getting it all put together. Are those each of the different platforms that you guys are utilizing? Are you pulling it separately, or is there a way to that you have right now to pull it all together so that you can actually not fly the plane as blind, so to speak?
App scores follow a student throughout their entire educational career, whether they're a Middletown student or whether they're in another district, if they're administering that test. In terms of Schoology and Google Classroom, those are really just the platforms that we use. It's a place where we're able to house all of the different lessons, different assignments, different activities that students may be engaging in. K-5 is where we decided to use Google Classroom, so Key can definitely speak to that. For 6-12, really about 3 years ago, we went full bore into using Schoology for all of those students 6-12, so that our teachers were able to, even in a traditional classroom, start transitioning to more digital content for our students versus, pen and paper, hardback textbooks. A lot of our textbooks, even at this point, are accessible to our students through their Chromebooks and an online platform versus them physically taking home a textbook.
Yeah, that is impressive for sure. So, okay. And then so Key, she mentioned the elementary, you guys I'll ask you the same question, but I'm curious how you guys are pulling your data, what you have used to be driving all of your successes at the school level throughout this. If there's any information that you guys wish you had earlier, and if there's any information that would really make a difference data wise for your school.
I'll answer the question in regards to information that we wish we had. Throughout this experience, I've learned that with limited time and limited exposure, we find our teachers trying to cover the entire gamut of the indicators and standards for students. I would have loved, and we had started working this prior to the pandemic in our own building. I would have loved to see some of those standards and priorities shrunk into a basic 5, a basic 10 list of priorities of skills that we definitely want students to have when they leave a specific grade level. Because like I said, with limited exposure and limited time, we can cover everything, but how far and how deep can we go in the learning of that material with such limited time and exposure for students? And so that's something I would have liked to have my hands on. And as I said, we've been working in our building to develop those grade level priorities that will become a part of our practice from this point forward. In regards to data in Google Classroom, it's basically just where we house the activities, the lessons, the videos. Our district did a great job in shrinking down the digital platforms that we're able to use. And so between MobiMax and Newsela and a few other platforms we have, those actual platforms house all the data, and teachers can pull reports from there that make it real easy to access and know exactly where students are. So if teachers want information, it is definitely out there, and it is not a struggle to get their hands on in regards to know where students are. The one downfall to that is when we do have to test and students are at home remotely, the accuracy of the information. We found ourselves getting into a situation where parents were kind of helping with assessments because they didn't want to see their children struggle. Once we got over the hump of trying to explain that we needed an accurate picture of where they are and their ability, that kind of helped with that process.
Very good. I think it's funny that you mentioned the parents because every parent has the best of intentions, and they, like you said, they don't want to see their child fall behind. The system that our youngest one is using, I happened to check one of her assignments, and she thought I wouldn't notice because it said it was submitted, but it was not graded yet. And I happened to click on it, and I was blown away that this was even a possibility that went through her head. But she just submitted the questions. She just copied and pasted and submitted the questions just so she could move on to the next thing. But again, with the pacing, I think she was afraid of getting behind. But I'm like, you didn't, like, I'm going to see your grade. Why did you what do you think the teacher's going to think when she sees you just submitted the questions? But the fears and anxieties, as you guys have mentioned, having the social, emotional part taken care of. But parents and students learning through this together is definitely a challenge, and everybody wants, like you said, the best for their kids. They don't want them to fall behind.